Oh, it's very delayed. Okay.
Well, they can still see me.
Hi everyone. I think we're now live. This is Misael. This is my wife Jennifer, and this is Nelly Aguilar, who is with us today as the guest attorney. And Nelly, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourself. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming on here with us.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. So, I wanted to do this so that at least there is a perspective and from an attorney's point of view as to, what has been occurring. I'll let you ask the questions so that we can get started.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
And well, just for anybody who is already with us or who's joined already, we have kind of an outline that we're going to be going through, and then towards the end, we'll open it up for more questions. We posted that we would be doing this, and people did actually start to send in questions. So we have quite a bit that we want to get through, but of course, we'll be paying attention to the chat and going through those as well as we can, but we'll open it up at the end for general questions, right?
Right, absolutely. So we have all the Instagram questions and all the questions that we were able to get already on hand. And then afterwards, we'll also open it up to the chat, like you said. So if you could delay your questions until then, so we can answer them in real life. So Nelly, first I wanted to ask you about your church background. How long were you in church? Were you born there? And how was that experience for you?
Yeah, so I was not born in church. Basically what happened is my grandmother was the first believer, and she joined the church before I was born, but then ended up leaving the church for whatever reason, I don't really know. And then she ended up finding the church when I was 10 years old, because I was raised by my grandmother. And so when I was 10 years old, that's when my grandmother found the church again and started going to church. So that's when I got introduced to the church. So that's, I was a young child. So, I grew up in the church. And I did a lot of things. I was in the choir for a while. But I ended up focusing on my studies because I wanted to go to college, and a lot of times, you can't go to college and go to church every day. And so,
Right.
so I made some sacrifices, and this is where I'm at.
Which is a good place to be from what we can see. Okay, so you joined church when you were a child. And then can you tell us a little bit about your career background?
Yeah, so I've been an attorney for 2 years, and I've done, when I first passed the bar, I worked as a deputy district attorney here in where I'm from. I did that for 2 years. Then I left the district attorney's office, and I wanted to have my own practice. So ever since then, I've been on my own. After I left the district attorney's office, I went into criminal defense work. And then I did that for a while. And I still continue to do that, not as much because my practice is mainly family law now. But I've done criminal defense, I've done bankruptcy, I've done immigration. So I've done a little bit of everything over the last 22 years. But my main focus right now is family law and then some criminal defense.
Gotcha. Okay, and then our next question is, when and why did you leave the church?
So that's a good question.
It's a big one.
That's a really good question. So, first of all, things happened to me when I was a minor child in the church. So because of what happened to me, I was never one of those really holy, everyday kind of person, going to church every day, right? But I like going to church. I liked going to church. My whole family, just about everybody is in church. And so I loved going with my family, being with my family in church. And so, but I always kept like like a safe distance from the church
Right.
myself, right? And so my grandmother passed away, and then I stayed going to the church. I attended, I like to go to the 5 a.m. services. I used to like those because I thought those you were, I don't know, it was like closer to God, because you're giving
Right.
them thing in the morning, your time in the morning, and your main focus and your first words of the day to him, right? So I really enjoyed those services. um, and then so everything came down when Nason got arrested. When he got arrested, they called everybody to church. I went to church to do the special service, right, that they did. And then as an attorney, I'm wondering what's going on, right? So then the complaint, and I figure it's really, really serious stuff that's going on, right? So I didn't think he had done that. So when it first came out, I didn't think he had done what he was being accused of. And so I even was trying to help in whichever way I could, not in the legal realm because I wasn't part of the legal team, but anyway. So I didn't believe that he had done what he was being accused of. But as things started to come out and information, because I did keep track of the case. I wanted to know what was being said in court. Was he being properly represented? What are his attorneys saying? What is the prosecution saying? And so as things started coming out, and then it didn't jive what was being told to the church, to the. And so I thought, a lot of red flags went up, and I'm like, okay, no, they're not giving the full story, or the twisting the information. And so I didn't like that. I did not like that. And so I started getting more information. And then finally, I think for me, it was a blessing in disguise, COVID, when they went ahead and did the shutdown, because then, we were at home, we were processing things. I was being, kind of away from everything, going to church or anything. And so as I was reading the information, to me, it was like, no, his own lawyers are admitting to conduct that is inappropriate, and he did what he's being accused of. And so that's when I decided that I was pretty much, I didn't think he was innocent. And so that didn't jive with me, and I wasn't okay with that.
And if I may ask, you mentioned that you were keeping up with the whole process when he was initially arrested. And then I think you had mentioned that you wanted to help, in his defense, and also because of your legal expertise and career background, you actually wanted to. I think you had mentioned that was the reason why you wanted to be well informed, so that you could make sure that his defense representation was appropriate.
Right. And I even, one of my close girlfriends of mine was a bail bonds agent. And I even, was asking her to help in getting bond, because at the beginning, when he was trying to get bailed out, he needed a bail bonds person to help him do the bail. Mm-hmm. And so I even asked her to help, get a bond set up. And so, she would drive 4 hours to get to LA to be there, and to try and help gather up the information and be ready for the bond.
Right. I thought that was so interesting that you mentioned that you found out because you wanted to help, right?
Right. And not that you need a reason to be informed. I mean, wanting to be informed is enough reason, but I'm just so glad that did lead you to knowing the truth. And also I imagine that it was less I don't know, just less easy for the church's lies to just kind of stand with you because of your legal background and because you actually understand what's going on. I think that just not having enough knowledge, not having enough information is a weapon that is being used to kind of keep people in their well, just disinformed state, I guess, uninformed state.
And yeah, to stay ignorant, I
Yeah.
guess.
Sorry, knowledge is power, I guess, is what we're trying to say. And you already kind of mentioned why you agreed to do this live, but I know that it was hard for you. I know that you did have to speak to family members, and I would like to ask you again if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, so it was a difficult decision for me, very difficult, because my family still go to church, and I don't want to hurt them. I love them. I love my family so much. I mean, them and my husband are just everything to me. And so I know that this is something that they're going to perceive as hurtful to them, that is probably going to hurt them. But I think it's very important for, I think, just for people to hear what the legal process is, to understand it a little bit better, and then make their own conclusions and decisions for their own lives. I think it's so important for everybody to have as much information as possible.
Right.
And even during during the time at the beginning of the case, I didn't really blame a lot of the ministers because they don't know the legal process themselves, But when when the people at the very top are disseminating information and wrong information that they could have verified with attorneys, his attorney, right? I didn't think that was right.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely, we agree. Are you looking at the comments?
So I just want to let you know that there's a lot of people greeting us in the chat, and they're greeting you as well. And some are saying that they wish it was in Spanish, but a los que hablan español nada más les quiero como los quiero saludar primero, pero también les quiero decir que queríamos hacer esta entrevista en inglés porque nos hemos dado cuenta que hay muchos recursos en español que hablan de el caso y como el canal de Virginia Beckett, que tiene muchísima información y ella ha hablado también de el caso y el proceso, pero a veces no todos tenemos esa misma facilidad en inglés y hay muchas personas que también se sienten más cómodas con el inglés y queríamos pues aprovechar que la abogada Nelly está aquí con nosotros para hablar también de su experiencia y del caso y todo el proceso. Entonces, sí vamos a volver a tocar el tema en el futuro en español, pero este video por hoy va a ser en inglés. Entonces, sí traté de anunciarlo así en inglés, pero ojalá y puedan estar con nosotros la próxima también. Sorry, Nelly.
Okay.
Yeah.
The next question I think is really important, just because I know that there will be a lot of people who will be open to listening to this video and who will be happy to receive the information. But I also know that there might be a lot of people who are skeptical as to, well, everything we're doing. Do you personally know the Jane Does?
Yes, I do now. I didn't know them obviously at the onset of the case, the criminal case. I didn't know them throughout the case. I got to meet them shortly before the sentencing, But before then, I already had believed in them and what they were saying. So I didn't need to meet them in order to realize that, what they were
Right.
saying was the truth.
It's the truth.
Just based on everything that was coming out. So yeah, I got to meet them, but it was shortly before the sentencing. That's when I got to meet them.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for clarifying that. So now we want to move on to basic procedural facts about the hearings. In cases like this, what are the victims generally offered?
They're not offered anything. They are. There is a victims fund in California where victims of crime can request certain things. Like, for instance, one of my cases that I had last year, my client was charged with domestic violence against his wife. His wife needed to relocate not relocate to a different city, but from the family residence to somewhere else. And so she was able to get a little bit of help so that she can get an apartment. And that came from the Victims Fund, California Victims Fund. So that's exactly what happened in this case with the Jane Does. They don't really get anything in the criminal case. I believe Jane Doe 4 got some assistance in getting an apartment, a down payment not a down payment, but like a down payment to rent an apartment. And then I believe there was some assistance regarding an immigration form fee for her husband, who was a doctor in Mexico and just needed to apply for his green card here. Jane Doe 4 is a U.S. citizen, so it's not like she got any immigration benefits or her husband. Her husband qualifies through her. So they don't get anything. They don't get offered anything other than if they need protection, like relocation costs, they can help with that. The victim fund also covers any if they're going through mental health, issues for counseling. If they need security, like to put up security cameras, they can help with that. But those are just minimal stuff that it's available to them just for their own protection and for their own mental health.
Right. So it sounds like they basically just get things that victims would need, not that they had anything to gain from.
Not a reward
right.
for doing this.
Right. Not that they had anything to gain from, the accusations that they have made in coming forward with everything that they went through. So thank you so much for clarifying that. I think that's so important for people to know, because I have heard that narrative myself coming from LLDM, and I think that that's so sad that they would push that narrative. These are victims and they don't receive anything in return. This isn't a huge conspiracy for speaking out.
Yeah, no, there wasn't a payout for them from the California Victims Fund.
Right, and that is something that I think I have heard a lot, that they did receive monetary compensation, but victims don't receive monetary compensation for coming out, and neither did they, right?
Correct. So I think there was a misunderstanding in the case, because the defense attorneys did bring that up to the judge, right? So they said, there's a text message where Jane Doe 4 says they can help us with the down payment. Well, the down payment was for the rent for to get an apartment, and
right.
That was the victim's fund. So it wasn't like this huge amount of money that they're going to get, but it was just some financial help. And you don't come forward and you don't accuse somebody of these types of things so that you can get, help with the first month's rent. You know what I'm saying? On a new apartment, do that. So anyways, I think his lawyers were confused about that, but I think it ended up being cleared up when the AG's office sent a spreadsheet of, the financial aid that the Jane Does had received, or Jane Doe 4. And even the judge at that point said, yeah, sorry.
It's okay. Whoops.
I think she can just rejoin whenever
Okay.
she's available.
Will we get a ding?
Todos están pidiendo que cambiemos al español. La próxima entrevista que vamos a hacer va a ser en español, o el próximo video sería en español. Ya habíamos platicado con Nelly acerca de este video y habíamos quedado en que iba a ser inglés, y ella, como su carrera aquí la ha llevado, también expresó que se sentía más cómodo hablando inglés. Entonces, disculpen.
Tal vez algo que podamos hacer también es después hacer un video donde tú traduzcas todo el video conforme
Sí, también.
estamos dispuestos a hacer eso. Así que si quieren dejar sus preguntas en español, se las podemos hacer en inglés y después se las traducimos, si eso funciona. Con mucho gusto.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. We're okay. Back. Yay, we made it. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, so the judge said no, there's nothing there. Basically, when that issue was brought up towards the end about whether they have a monetary incentive, and so yeah, that was it.
Okay. Thank you so much for clarifying that again. And so the next question we have on here is, what is a civil lawsuit and what is a criminal lawsuit, and how do they differ?
Okay, so there is no criminal lawsuit. What there is there's a criminal proceeding and a criminal complaint, right? Okay. A criminal complaint is where somebody's being charged with crimes, violating the law. And in a criminal complaint, you can lose certain liberty. Your liberty, you can go to jail, you can be fined, you can be put on probation. There's a lot of things that can happen in a criminal case. In a civil case, there's no, you don't lose your civil liberties. You can't go to jail, you can't be put on probation, you can't, you can't, pay penalties or fines from the court or anything like that. But in a civil lawsuit, it's about financial restitution for wrongs that were committed. So it is about financial restitution of the victim or the person that was wronged. That's the civil part of it. In the criminal case, there's no payment to the victims from the person who committed the acts, the wrongful acts. There, in criminal cases, there could be a restitution for monies that the victims have spent because of the crimes. Like, for instance, for example, if they went to counseling and they spent money on counseling, that could be ordered as restitution. Certain things like that. So there's a difference. In a criminal case, a person can lose their civil liberty. They can go to jail. They can be put on probation. They can be fined. In a civil case, it's about financial restitution, not restitution, but financial, basically, the person that was wronged will be financially, what do you call it? They'll be basically getting money to make them whole again, basically.
Gotcha.
Gotcha. Thank you. That's really clear. That's very clear. Okay. Do you have any further questions on that?
No further questions, but I don't know if you would mind answering. Somebody has asked a couple of times if somebody is sexually abused. Is there a statute of limitations on how long they have to report that?
There is. So basically, if they were abused when they were a child, I believe right now, the statute, I think, is 20 years after you turn 18. So, I mean, there's a little bit of time there. But yeah, so, I mean, obviously, the sooner that you report it, the better. That way, because sometimes the law enforcement doesn't want to really take old cases. So they don't really take, you might file a police report, but they may not move on it. The prosecution may say, it's too long or there's not enough evidence. So, obviously the better, the sooner that you report it, the better.
And would somebody just go to any attorney, or where could they find the resources on how to properly submit their complaint?
So they have to go to a law enforcement. So they either go to a police department or they go to the sheriff's department, depending where they live, right? They could contact an attorney and they could tell them how to, where to go to file a police report. But that's where a criminal case starts. You have to file a police report, and then it evolves from there. In the particular case for the Jane Does, what happened is the Attorney General for the state of California, he opened up a web page where people could go in and report if there were victims of sexual abuse from clergy members, from whatever denomination, could have been Catholics or whatever. So he opened up that page, and I think, I'm pretty sure that's how this case started. The Jane Does went there, they filed their complaint there, and then that's where the investigation started.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you said it's 18 years, it's 20 years after you turn 18, so not 20 years from the incident, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But, laws always change. So, they may shorten that later. I don't know. So don't wait around. That's for sure.
Right.
Vicky
Ortiz, we'll get to your questions towards the end a little bit more. We're going to go through a few more, and then we'll open it up for more questions. But I've noted yours down, just so you know.
Okay, and to everybody who just tuned in, we are asking the questions that we received on Instagram and through Reddit, and then we will open it up for questions on here. Questions about Nason's case. Who are his attorneys? Can you tell us a little bit about them, what we know?
Yeah, so his attorneys are Alan Jackson and Caleb Mason, and they are one of the best law firms in the country, in the US. And so they do a lot of cases. They do a lot of sexual abuse cases, but they are one of the best law firms in the country.
Okay.
So when you say best, you mean they are good at defending their clients, right?
Yes.
In these types of cases.
They're good at defending potential offenders.
Yes, they do that, and then they, I believe, they're also representing him in the civil cases. So, because there's the civil case that was filed by Xochitl, and then there's another victim that came forward and filed another complaint for sexual battery against Nason, and so Alan Jackson and his law firm is involved in that case too.
Okay. I do know that he had other lawyers previously. Can you kind of tell us about the history of how that happened, the lawyers that he went through, and then who can you give us also examples of who his current lawyers have represented?
Right. So the first lawyer that did his arraignment, I don't know, how long he was in the case. I know he did the arraignment, and I think, most people saw the arraignment and saw who was representing him. I don't really know what happened to him. Maybe he got fired because he couldn't get him out. But then he got the other two attorneys, the Rosenfeld and Sawyer. And so those are the attorneys that did those interviews with or videos for the church. I don't know if you recall that.
Yes.
Definitely.
Those lawyers were from Sacramento, and they also specialize in defending sexual cases, criminal cases. And from reading the transcripts, I gathered that after they did the bail hearing, because they filed a couple of motions to set a bail. The first bail was set at 50 million. Then they filed a motion in which they included information about Jane Doe 4. I don't know if you recall that. So then after they filed their motion, sometime after that, then it was set at no bail. And then after they did that, then it went to 90 million.
Right.
Sometime during that time, I believe that Nason ended up hiring Alan Jackson and Caleb to represent him. And they were supposed to, from what the transcripts say, they were supposed to do a joint representation, but then that didn't happen. So Alan Jackson and Caleb Mason just became the only attorneys representing him.
Gotcha. And I know that they have also represented pretty high profile people.
Yes, absolutely. I know that Alan Jackson has represented like a prince from Saudi Arabia who was accused of sexual accusation against him. And then also, what's his name? Not Harvey, the one in Weinstein, what's his name?
I think it is Harvey Weinstein.
Is it Harvey? Harvey Weinstein, the producer. So, and he has a similar case as Nason, and they're basically doing some of the same things that they did in Nason's case, which was a lot of appeals, a lot of motions regarding technicalities about, different things. So, so that's what they do, and they're really good at it.
So, right. So I think that's so interesting that as many people have pointed out in the past, that there are, like yourself at the time, attorneys within the church and lawyers in the church, but Nason wanted to go and find these lawyers who specialize in defending against sexual misconduct. And I think that that's and like you said, they're the best in the country at what they do.
And he upgraded his lawyers. We did wonder about that while we were still in church. That was a question that we had. We were like, well, what about autoconsumo? Like, what about the lawyers? So we did find that very helpful, honestly, and like kind of, as a red flag, I guess. And so it was helpful, just kind of being like, maybe there is something off here.
Well,
okay.
Like I said, they are one of the best law firms in these types of cases, but they're super expensive too. Right. I'm sure he spent millions of dollars in his representation, millions. And so, but like for me, and I can tell you just from my own experience, there's, even though I do criminal defense work, I don't do cases where there was sexual abuse of children. That's just not what I do. And that's something that I can not have to do because I work for myself. So, you can specialize in whatever area. And that's one of the areas that they specialize in.
Right. It's awful. Okay, so this question is kind of referencing what you and we had already spoken about. So the church mentioned strategies employed by Nason's lawyers, specifically admitting to affairs. The church claims never actually happened. Is this standard in hearings like this?
So as lawyers, we have to abide by rules of professional conduct when we go to court, when we engage with other attorneys, but more importantly, when you're in court, right? So as officers of the court, which we as lawyers are, we're officers of the court. Um, we're not supposed to mislead the judge about anything. We're not supposed to. So like if we know that our client is we're going to put our client on the stand to testify. If we know our client is going to lie, we cannot do that. We cannot put him on the stand if we know he's going to lie. We cannot tell the judge a lie because it's strategy in our case. We cannot mislead the judge. We cannot mislead the other attorneys in court regarding any defenses or anything like that. So that was one of the red flags that definitely was was something that really stood out for me when they said, they're saying things for strategy. That's not the way it works in court. And Jackson and Mason, they make millions and millions and millions of dollars representing people. They're not going to put their license in jeopardy to lie to the judge about a case. They're not. I mean, they just make too much money. They're not going to do that. And Jackson was himself a prosecutor. So you don't lie to the judge for strategy purposes. And certainly, that was something that was wrong that was told to the members.
Right.
So I just want to clarify, like, for example, there was instances near closer to the beginning where Nason appeared, as the court said, in videos, having at the very least an affair, even if it wasn't child abuse at that or at those specific references that they were making. And the church was telling us, the members, that the lawyer saying that he had his own defense team admitting to the affair was just a strategy to move the proceedings along. And you're saying that they can't, if he didn't actually have those affairs, his defense team could lose their license for admitting to those affairs or for acknowledging those affairs?
They could lose their license if they lie to the judge. So if they mislead the judge. So for example, in this case, so there was videos. There was videos of Nason on his phone that was on his person when he got arrested, and on his iPad, which was on his person when he got arrested, right? So in the videos, it's him and engaging in sexual activity with other people. So like his attorneys never denied those videos, right? They never said to the judge, these videos have been doctored, or these videos are fake, or these videos have been manipulated somehow, right? It's not our client. They never said that because that's not true. And so when the church is being told that those are fake videos, right? That's not what his lawyers are saying in court. His lawyers have like the best digital forensic expert coming and working for them and looking at those videos. And if they would have inkling of those videos being fake or being doctored or being, manipulated anyway, they would have certainly brought it up to the judge, and they could have, right? but they
Right.
didn't. They never did. So the lawyers could not tell the judge, "Hey, judge, we agree that he's having an affair, but he's really not having an affair," right? So if Nathan affair, the lawyers could not go into court and say, "Yes, he did. Yes, Your Honor, he had an affair." You see what I'm saying? So if
Right.
they knew that Nathan did not have an affair, they could not go into court and tell the judge, "Yes, Your Honor, yes, he did have an affair," knowing that they're lying to the judge based on what Nathan told them, right?
Right. If they're doing that, they're risking their license and their career, their whole career,
Yeah,
to do that. Meanwhile, the church is not being told, they're being warned not to watch this because there will be lies as strategies coming from the attorneys, the defense team. So the church was being warned and they were being told, don't watch the news. And if you hear anything, remember they're just strategies that the lawyers are coming up with to win the case. But thank you so much. That is so helpful to know that actually they would be jeopardizing their whole career if they were to do that. This is not a common practice. Lawyers don't willingly lie to judges. So
yeah,
thank
I know. Especially lawyers of this caliber that have, I mean, they make millions of dollars. They're not going to put their license on the line just to say, a lie about some case, right?
right. Right. So this particular question is kind of, I wish I could have just like gathered all the questions into just one, but there were many that I wasn't able to do that. So this question, I guess, comes up in other forms, but people really wanted to know if Nathan or the apostle was allowed to speak during the sentencing hearing.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. He could have spoken. He could have addressed the court if he wanted to after the Jane Does made their impact statement. It happens all the time. Usually, those statements from the defendant come in where the judge is going to sentence you and you don't really know what he's going to do, right? So then, usually, or a lot of times the defendants, they really are remorseful about what they did and they want to express that. And they certainly have the right to. And I think it helps them, right? But Nathan didn't want to. He didn't want to address the court. He didn't want to make a statement. He didn't want to address the Jane Does. Never during the hearing, because I was there the whole day inside the courtroom. Never during the hearing did the judge say to Nathan that you cannot look at the Jane Does. You cannot address them. He had the right, certainly had the right to make his own statement, and he chose not to.
So you're saying he could have defended himself or shown some remorse in a final statement to the judge before being sentenced, as if he didn't know what the judge was going to sentence him to, right?
Right. So they already knew what he was going to be sentenced to, right? So there was basically no incentive for him to get up and say, "Your Honor, I'm sorry," because everything had been worked out, first of all. And I think, even in cases where the sentence has been worked out, right? If it's been worked out, sometimes the defendant just feels sorry for his conduct, for his behavior, for the hurt that he caused, right? And they make those statements even though it's not going to impact their sentence. But he chose not to, and he certainly has the right not to make a statement, but nobody prevented him from doing so.
Thank you. And then somebody asked, was he able to write letters? I don't know if that question is regarding the sentencing hearing or if it's just in general, but so Avi, if you wouldn't mind just adding some more detail to that, but we'll definitely come back to it. so this next section, because as you mentioned, you are familiar with the Jane Does, you know the Jane Does. There's some things that they also asked if we could help kind of get out there. And one of these questions was, did the Attorney General just do a bad job? Or how could we kind of begin to go into what actually happened towards the end at the sentencing hearing?
So I think what happened in the case is the Attorney General's office did not allocate enough resources to this case because and one of the big issues was always Alan Jackson and Caleb Mason asking for all of the text messages of the Jane Does, right? Well, and what they called Brady material, which is material that could be used to impeach the witnesses, the complaining witnesses, the victims, or material that could be used to basically say Mason didn't do it, right? So it's going to be exculpatory, basically saying that he didn't do it, that it kind of exonerates him, or it could be impeachment, where they can use it against them to say you're lying, we caught you in a lie or whatever, right? So to show their credibility, the victim's credibility. So from the very beginning, the defense attorneys had been asking for all of their text messages. Well, the AG's office did not allocate enough attorneys or enough resources for an attorney to sit there and go through all of the text messages, review them all to determine what could be considered Brady material, right? So what they did is they had the investigators, or the detectives, the agents, go through all of the text messages and basically state, these are the relevant, these are, irrelevant or whatever, when it should have been really a lawyer looking at that, because a lawyer is the one that makes that determination whether or not it could be Brady material, not agents. And so from the very beginning, the AG's office said, no, we've given them all the Brady materials. We've complied with our Brady obligation. We've given them everything. And so then shortly before they're going to do their trial, one of the deputy AGs, his name is Siegel, last name is Siegel. He says, oh, wait a minute, I think there's stuff in here, because he's getting ready for trial, right? So he's reviewing everything. He's reviewing all the text messages, which should have been done at the beginning, right? So he's reviewing everything. And so when he reviews everything, he says, oh, wait a minute, there might be something that, the defense may consider to be Brady material. And so that's when they had this big old meeting with the judge, and so they gave him all the stuff, right? So this was, I think, in October of 2021. So anyways, there was a big blowout. And so they turned over everything, all of the text messages. And then from those text messages is when the defense filed a motion to dismiss the case, saying, because of this Brady violation, they didn't give us all of this stuff. And because there's exculpatory and impeachment evidence in those text messages, the case should be dismissed. But then, when Judge Marcus reviewed the motion, which was like over 200 pages, he reviewed a lot of those text messages, and he said, yeah, no, I don't think that they really are exculpatory. Some of them are inculpatory more than exculpatory, and then impeachment, perhaps, but we don't know the entire context of the conversation, because they would take little snippets from, the different conversations and say, oh, this is impeachment, because they're saying something different here. But it wasn't an overall context. So that's what happened. So when a combination of that, the combination of, not allocating enough resources, I think led to the outcome that would happen. So, when there was multiple motions, there was multiple appeals. They even appealed to the California Supreme Court. All of their appeals got shut down except for that one appeal where his case was dismissed. I don't know if you remember when the charges were dismissed.
Yes.
But, it's such a big issue. Brady is like, the Brady violation is just a big issue that I think the AG's office knew that was going to be appealed and it was going to keep going for years. That I think that's why they decided to reach this agreement. And so I think that's what led to the 16 years, because I think the deputy AGs knew that this was going to be an ongoing issue and that they were going to appeal, and it was going to cost more money to continue to litigate this case. There's always the risk, of things that could happen in cases. And so what if it would have been appealed, if they went to trial and he was convicted and it would have been appealed, so they would have been in limbo for more years, going through the appeals process possibly, and more resources being expended. And so they decided to make this deal. I'm guessing it was the AG's office that made the offer for the 16 years, or the offer. That's usually what happens in cases. So like when you get as a defense attorney, when you get a criminal case and you go to court and you go there to arraign your client, usually, pretty soon after that, you get an offer. The prosecution will say, okay, if you pleads to this, then we'll dismiss these other counts, right? That's usually what happens. But that happens at the beginning of the case. In this case, I think after all of the appeals and everything that happened in the case, I think the offer came kind of towards the end, and that's how they resolved the case. But it was complicated. There was not a lot of resources allocated to the case that should have been. Right. And there was going to be a fight every step of the way, whether it was appeals or motions or whatever it was.
So at the end of the day, the likely reason for why so many charges were dismissed and they came to the agreement that they did was because, if I'm understanding correctly, the Attorney General's office in California knew that no matter how the case proceeded, the defense team was just going to keep appealing, keep dragging out the case, trying to wait for some technicality to come up and then be able to get the whole thing dismissed. So the Attorney General's office just really didn't want to risk something else happening and it being appealed for indefinitely. Is that why the deal was so, because so many people were so upset with the deal, right? Because they were saying there's so much evidence, it seems so sure. Absolutely. That he was going to go to trial and be found guilty.
Right. Yeah. I think it was because of these Brady issues, that they didn't review all of the materials at the beginning, turn it over to the defense, all the numerous appeals that they had to fight in court, basically, the numerous motions. And then, there's always also too, I wasn't privy to the negotiations or anything like that, so I don't have firsthand knowledge. But when you take a case to trial, the prosecution, they have to have all their ducks in order, obviously, and they did. When so basically on May 2nd is when they filed the motion, right? They filed a motion. Jackson's lawyers filed a motion regarding some evidence, and so the motion was denied. Then that decision was appealed, and the appeal was denied. So then they were going to do their trial, and on May 30th, let me see, when was it? So on June 1st, they go in and they're doing motions in limine. Motions in limine is when when you bring up to the judge issues that you want addressed before the trial starts. Some of the issues could be excluding some evidence. Some of the issues could be whether somebody can testify or not. So I think it was like the perfect storm, because once they had that hearing, the motions in limine, what the defense was trying to do is that they were trying to exclude, for the court not to allow the video of Nathan and Susana Medina to be shown to the jury. So that particular video that was found on his phone, that was on his person, is where, she's doing oral copulation, and then, she spits it back in his mouth after, whatever, his own semen in his mouth. So his lawyers, because that's consenting adults, that is not illegal. That's adult porn. Adult porn is not illegal, in this country. They wanted that to be excluded because it was just gonna shock the jury from what they were gonna see, right? And so the AG's office fought that and said no, because that's kind of indicative of his conduct, him and Susana's conduct as it relates to one of the Jane Does, which is what they had her do, right? What Susana had her do to him. So then then the defense attorneys were saying, well, judge, can we just stipulate that, they had this relationship? Because they didn't want the video to be shown to the jury. They didn't, because you knew that the case was going to be broadcasted, right? And so in the screens, there was going to be media people there. There was going to be recordings. I think there was going to be law and crime there. So they were going to show the video. So the attorneys, the defense attorney says, we'll stipulate that, we can tell the jury that they had an affair, and that's what they did, right? But they just didn't want that video to be shown. Anything but showing the video. We'll stipulate that they had an affair. We'll stipulate that, that's the type of things that they did amongst, each other, but they didn't want to show the video. And so the judge said, no, we're going to show the video. I'm going to let the prosecution show the video. So the importance of that is that the porn videos that were on his devices were not going to be shown to the public. I think what was going to happen in trial is it was going to be shown to the jury, but I think the media, the cameras or whoever was there was not going to be able to show that in the recordings, right? Any of the porn stuff, any of the child pornography videos, right? But the adult video, the adult porn video was going to be able to be shown basically to the entire world. And I think that's when Nathan decided, I'm going to plead. I'm going to plead, because 2 days later, on June 3rd, is when he pleads to those counts. And then, they did it so rushed. They didn't consult with the Jane Does. So I think once the judge made that finding, I think he decided, I'm just going to plead. And so then they worked out a deal. And I think that's what happened.
So on June 1st, the judge said no to them not showing the video. And by June 3rd, he had agreed to the plea deal.
Right.
Wow. I actually was not aware of that June 1st incident.
Right.
Yeah, during that hearing too, the defense was trying to have a couple of witnesses or some witnesses testify, via Zoom from Mexico. The judge said no. Judge said there are legal avenues where you can bring, witnesses from Mexico via, special visa to come and testify. So I'm not going to let them testify via video. And I believe there was, Nason was also, or the defense also had some kind of psychiatrist ready to testify, and his testimony was going to be limited also. But I think the key was that video. I think the key was the video. And then, so that was the motivation on the defense side. And then the motivation on the prosecution side to settle the case was all of these other things that have been happening in the case, right? And the possible, looking forward at appeals, or even maybe even if you get in a criminal case, if you get one juror that says, no, I don't think he did it, then you get a hung jury. And then you have to do the trial again. So
Right.
there were so many factors, and I think it was a perfect storm, and that's why both sides were motivated to reach an agreement.
As you're saying this, and I think this is what I felt when all of this was happening. None of this has to do with the Jane Does. I'm going to move on to this one. None of this has to do with the Jane Does, and it makes me so. I think it's infuriating. This was supposed to be about them, about what was done to them, about them getting some sort of justice. But it turned into just, her attorneys being afraid, the state of California being afraid that this was going to be dragged on forever, and him wanting to preserve some kind of dignity, and not showing the videos, and the Jane Does were just kind of hung out to dry. I remember when he pled guilty, and it didn't feel like justice. It didn't feel like something to be happy about or something to be relieved by. It felt exactly like, as you're telling me, it feels that way again, that this was not about the Jane Does anymore at that point. It's just a comment, but it makes me so angry.
Yeah, it's very, for the Jane Does to go through, how many years they went from 2019 all the way up until 2022. They wanted their day in court. They told the judge during their victim is that they wanted for the trial to go through, so that they could, state their, their truth. I think it's devastating what happened, because, and, I don't know if it's because it was, Hispanic, victims, that they didn't put enough resources to that case, because in other federal cases, you've seen the Warren Jeffs case, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So nothing compared, to what has been shown in this case. But even like, what's his name? The other guy from Nexium, what's his name? Keith Rainier.
Mm-hmm.
And he was mainly dealing with adult women.
Adults.
There was no minors involved, and he got life in prison, right? So it was, to say the least, disillusioning, that this happened.
Right. Absolutely.
Definitely. And then there's been the new civil lawsuit that's been filed. Can you tell us a little bit about what the contents of that complaint are?
So it's basically 4 causes of action: 1 for sexual battery, 1 for intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligence, and then gender violence. Kind of, it's the same causes of action that the other victim, like I told you guys, there's another lawsuit filed against Nason by another, not related to these Jane Does, another victim. And so it's the same causes of actions. And then they include a lot of the people that covered up, people that should have, known what was happening. And, they were either aiders and abettors, or they just, stayed silent and covered it up, so So that's what it involves. And then, like I said, in a civil lawsuit, it's about monetary damages, right? Making the plaintiff whole as far as monetary damages. So I think, I don't do those kind of cases, but because they have a conviction, because he admitted to 3 counts for the Jane Doe's 1, 2, 3, it's going to be an easier case to prove for sure because he's already admitted to the conduct.
Right. We did hear that in this lawsuit, the organization is also being sued. So they're suing, I believe, Nason and the organization. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so they are suing the organization because the organization basically allowed this to happen, right? So being from church, both of you, I know that nobody's going to question the apostle. Nobody is going to, if somebody reports something to any of the commissions in church, if he's done something wrong, he's violated somebody or he's, sexually assaulted somebody, even if you report it to a commission, no, there's not going to be any consequences. So basically, the organization is liable for not protecting these victims and not taking the necessary precautions, because a lot of the ministers, like the higher ups, they knew what was going on. I mean, you have Joram Nunez, going and asking one of the Jane Does to sign a declaration that he prepared, and, which is illegal basically, because you don't just prepare a declaration, say, here, you sign it, everything that I put in here, you're going to sign, right? If anybody, when people write declarations, they write them themselves basically, and you, if you're their attorney, then you clean it up or do something like that, but it's their statement under penalty of perjury, so it has to come from them. You can't just prepare a declaration and say, here, sign it. But even at that, how do they know to have her sign it, right? Why her, right?
Right.
And then just some of the higher ups, the ministers, they knew what was going on and they didn't stop it. So that's why not only the organization is being named as a defendant, there's ministers that the bishops are being named as defendants, family members are being named as defendants, and just some of the higher ups.
Okay. So then, just to clarify the contents of the lawsuit, the Jane Does are suing Nason, the church, bishops, and family members.
Yeah, they are. And, when ministers have a duty, they're what they're called mandated reporters. Right? And so when you go to a minister and you report that somebody has done something to you, especially in a sexual assault or if anybody has abused a child, has violated a child, has raped a child, or so they're mandated reporters. They're supposed to report it to the authorities. None of that happened.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. So then, those are basically the contents of the new lawsuit, the civil lawsuit, right?
Right.
And then, okay, and then so it looks like we're going to be moving on to questions from Instagram. We did receive quite a few. So when will the evidence be public or discoverable? Will it, or if so, when?
Right. So that's up to the Jane Doe's attorneys. So basically what they can do is they can subpoena the evidence that's with the AG's office, because they still have all of the evidence, right? They have all of the child porn videos. They have the pictures. They have everything, right? So their attorney can subpoena those documents for the civil case. I'm not really clear as to whether or not the child porn will be released, because it is illegal to distribute child pornography, right?
Right.
That's laws. So perhaps with a protective order, like there was in the criminal case, because there was in the criminal case there was a protective order that the child pornography could not be disseminated, dispersed to anybody but the attorney, so they can review it. And so there was really specific orders protecting and making sure that those videos didn't get out, right? So perhaps with some of those same protective orders, they'll be able to get those videos. I don't know when their lawyers, or if the Jane Doe's lawyers, are going to release that information or those videos. They should have no problem in the adult porn videos. They should have no problem getting those. And there's not just one video, there's multiple videos that were discussed in the criminal case. Multiple adult porn videos.
There's been even when I was part of the church, I know that there was like word out there that the image of Nason was copyrighted, and that there was a lot of protection of his, like any media had to be published by Berea directly. Is it possible, if the Jane Doe attorneys ever do allow the videos to be obtained by outside sources or other sources, is it possible for the church to somehow buy the rights, or keep for the church to get them and get rid of them?
No, I don't think so. It's not a video produced by Berea. It was produced then, right? So I mean, and he's not Berea, right? Because he claims in everything, in all his documents, that he's not Berea, right? So I don't know that they'll be able to claim it as copyrighted material. I don't think that they.
Okay.
That's a good question. Do you want to ask the next one?
Yes.
We can take turns.
What are the chances that this new case will be settled outside of court?
So most cases are settled out of court. There's very few trial. Even in criminal cases, 97-98% of the cases get settled by a plea agreement. Like I said, when you get a criminal case and you have the arraignment, shortly thereafter you get an offer, and most of them settle by plea agreements. Same thing is in civil cases. Not that many go to trial. I think the Jane Does want the information to come out. I don't know that they're gonna want to settle, but if he agrees to their demands, then there's nothing to go to trial on.
Right. Okay. And then the next question is, in the new lawsuit, from a legal standpoint, can the church be asked to make an official statement of truth as one of the punishments to require or requirements from the judge?
No, the judge cannot order that. That's not part of the remedies that are being sought for. It could be part of a settlement. Because the Catholic Church did that, right? So they, as part of their settlement, they had to make not only retributions to the victims, but they had to make statements. And so that was part of the settlement for the Catholic Church. It could be part of a settlement here.
Oh, that. I wonder if they've probably thought of that. Hopefully they have thought of that. I know a lot of us have family in there and would like to see that happen.
I think just people need to know the truth, and
yes, absolutely.
Break my heart when lies keep coming still to them, and because it's my family and I love them, And I know that they want to serve God.
Yeah.
We all want to serve God. We love God. We love Jesus. We love our families, and it's just heartbreaking that the lies continue. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of talk by people about an FBI investigation. I mean, even though Nason was charged with child pornography, possession of child pornography in the state case, he can still be charged in a federal court for possession of child pornography for those same pictures. So it might be over, and it would not be double jeopardy, because that's not what he pled to. He didn't go to trial. He settled on those 3 counts. So, I mean, the feds could technically take it over and then charge him with child pornography, possession of child pornography, or even human trafficking. They could do that still. Yeah.
What would be required for that to happen? Would the Jane Does have to do this, or how could this happen?
So the only way it could happen is if the FBI becomes interested in the case and they start interviewing the Jane Does, and then obviously they get the evidence from the AG's office. So I don't know what's going on, if the FBI is really interested in that, but technically they could, because it would not be considered double jeopardy for him to be charged in federal court for possession of child pornography, or even the human trafficking.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Since the church is being sued, and if they are found guilty, can the judge tell the church they are required to make aware of? We can have already asked this question. I guess a lot of people want to know if there's any way to require the church to make aware or tell their followers in the US about about the abuse.
Yeah, no, that's not a remedy that is being for, and I don't know that you could ask for that. But like I said, in a settlement, you could get that. You could make that part of the settlement and say, we're going to settle for this, but you have to do this, right?
Right. And also, there was another question. Would you be able to clarify that it was his choice to plead guilty? That, in other words, the church believes that he's innocent, but in his letter to the church, he expressed that it was the only way that he could see the church again. And so they say that, again, it was strategy, not actually that he was guilty.
Well, in his plea, the judge asked him specifically, that if you plead guilty, you are back guilty. And he said yes. So, I mean, he made the statement, and it's in the transcript, and Virginia Beckett has done such a phenomenal job at translating all of those transcripts. It's in there. He said it. He admitted it. If he wasn't guilty, then he wouldn't have done that. I mean, so typically when you have a defense team like he did, right? Typically you don't plead guilty, you take it to trial. I mean, what did Michael Jackson do? He took it to trial. What did, a lot of those famous people have taken it to trial, have taken their cases to trial. People that have a lot of money don't really plead guilty. They take things to trial because, there's a lot of appeals. There's a lot of things that you can do. There's motions that you can file. So he pled guilty because he believed that that was in his best interest. And the judge asked him, "You're pleading guilty because you are in fact guilty?" And he said, "Yes."
I think that's an important clarification to point out, because although you reference the transcripts, many of the church members are told not to look at any of that. And I think it's just important to remember that this is what actually happened, and there's there's nothing that we have done or that has been manipulated. It is just what it is.
Nelly, I would like to ask you, in your opinion, is pleading guilty as he did a good option for a person who is actually innocent? So if he was actually innocent, would it have benefited him more to plead guilty or not to have pled guilty?
So a defendant who has so many resources like he does, he has all the resources in the world, right? It would not have been to his benefit to plead guilty, other than he knew that if he took this to trial, the video was going to come out, and then his exposure would have been a lot more, right? He could have, if he's found guilty, he could have been going to prison for life. Obviously, there's the appeals, and it could, come back, but then, it's still uncertainty. And so I think his lawyers did a really good job in getting him the 16 years. But typically, people who are innocent and have these kind of resources that he had to spend millions of dollars in his defense do not plead guilty. Look at Bill Cosby, just they don't. They take things to trial, and then they take their chances, especially with lawyers, of this caliber.
Right.
I was gonna just mention that more people have asked questions in the chat, and I know I said it earlier, but if you have questions, please feel free to write them. We're also going to ask for questions in a little bit. And then Salvador asked if it's legal for the church to ask the church members for personal information like emails and social media. And I just wanted to ask Salvador if you could clarify, are they asking for like passwords, or I'm not sure what you mean. So if you could just add that, I'll note it down as well to ask. And then also I just wanted to make a quick note that we have a list of questions, but a lot of them have kind of already been answered in the course of the conversation. So I guess we could go a little bit faster, and then if you've already mentioned it, we can just answer it quickly and move on to the next one. Yeah. I know it's getting kind of late, and I don't want to take up too much of your time.
It's okay.
Right. As usual, we say. Yeah. Good for you. Okay, I had another question that popped in my head. Why did his sentence already get reduced? What happened there?
So the state of California, the California Department of Corrections, basically has the discretion to give certain time credits. So before the law changed, when it was up to basically the courts, right, and not the California Department of Corrections, they were pretty strict. You did your 85% if you were convicted of crimes that were violent in nature, and then the other ones you would do 50% of the time. Okay. So now they have like different mechanisms. So one of them is if you have never been convicted of a crime before, then if you're going to prison, then automatically you get like a third of your sentence off because you've never been convicted before. And then if certain classes, that could count as early time credits also. So there's just different things that are available. And I don't know if it's because of the overpopulation or they just want, people, the programs that they have there available are supposed to rehabilitate or help rehabilitate the persons, so that they can come back and reintegrate themselves into society again as, law-abiding citizens. But I don't know. I mean, I have friends and clients who are and have been correctional officers for the state of California. And, they say, sometimes you get those child molesters, they come back, and they're only there for 5 years, and then they get to go out again. And it's just, it's not right, but that's the system that we have.
Right. Well, thank you for your answer. That's very awful. This next question was asked by someone for you through Instagram. Personally, how are you? As a professional, educated person, how do you feel lied to? So that's the first part of the question.
So I'm torn because I love my family, but I know that somebody has to say the truth, right? I mean, you guys are doing it, other people are doing it. You guys are doing it in a more loving manner than other people are. But there's really been no professional coming up and telling people, what really happens through a court case, what happens in a criminal court case, what can be done, what can't be done, so, and people don't know. And I feel like somebody needed to do it. It's, I know it hurts my family, and I don't want to hurt my family, but I know it has to be said. And so up until now, they hadn't shunned me. They, I was one of the very lucky ones that even though I told them how I felt, they respected my decision. They continued to love me and include me in their life. But now I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping, I can, I can still love them. They can still love me, and we can still have family gatherings. Because, I mean, what do we have, in this life? All we have is our family, our convictions, our beliefs, and, and God in our lives, right? And so, and family is, one of the top things in our lives.
Right.
My husband is very supportive of me, but he's not from the church. So he's not from the church. And so, of course, take that. But my family, I know, is going to be hurt. And so, and I love them, and I don't want to make this to be, something where I am just being disrespectful and ugly and mean. That's not what I want. I just want the truth to be out.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for doing this, and also thank you for everything that you just said.
Yes.
I think we can really relate to you and your position, and I know that it's really hard, but I love how you put it. Somebody has to say it, and if not us, then who? So thank you so much. The second part to that question is, ethically, do you think ministers and other professionals still in the church should not allow for such inconsistencies to go unquestioned?
Yeah, I think there's need to be some radical changes in the church so that these things don't continue to happen. As coming from the church, we were always told, it wasn't good to bring up the ugly within the church, because obviously you didn't want to hurt the servant of God. You don't want to cause some sadness on him. You didn't want the reputation of the church to be, to be somehow hurt
or damaged.
Right. Yeah, damaged. But but that's not the right approach. And, now in more the Bible, obviously I didn't before as much. And so now it's like, I don't think Jesus would want people to lie. Jesus does, that's not him. And so and his church cannot be a church that lies to people, that lies to his members. And so, like at the beginning of the case, when the red flag started going up for me, it's like when the spokespeople from the church were going in on TV and lying about, these girls or these women, that were his assistants, secretaries, whatever you want to call them, that they didn't know them. And I'm like, okay, no, why are you lying? No, don't lie. And and then, nobody was stopping them. And I'm like, well, nobody's stepping up to stop these lies. And so that's when the red flag started going up for me. And I'm like, no, that's not right. And then, just everything and here we are.
Right.
Right. I wanted to ask, somebody asked, the judge willingly overlooked evidence that proved his innocence. It's a line that the church told the membership. Is that true? And why do you think that assumption is being made?
I'm sorry, can you ask that question again?
Yeah, pretty much it's, so the church leadership tells the members that the judge is willingly overlooking evidence proving his innocence.
No, that didn't happen. And so even in the June 1st transcript, it was interesting because so Judge Cohen, when they were arguing about this video, whether this adult porn video should be let in or let out, that video was shown at the preliminary hearing in August of 2020. So you remember, I don't know if you remember, the preliminary hearing was August of 2020, around the day of Holy Supper. So when the Holy Supper was going on, all of this stuff was being played out in court. So the video was played out in court, right? And so the defense attorney asked the judge, well, I don't know, Your Honor, if you recall this video. And the judge says, oh, I recall the video. So, 2 years later, he recalls very vividly what the video was. But yeah, so the judge is not overlooking any innocent that, or any evidence that proves that he was innocent. I mean, and it ultimately, it was an agreement that was reached by lawyers in the AG's office that said, okay, he's going to plead to these 3 counts and he's going to go to prison for this amount of time. So, but it was going to be a jury that was going to determine his innocence or whether or not he was guilty. He didn't want to take it to a jury. He didn't want to take that risk and take it to a jury where he could have testified. He could have taken the stand and testified at a trial, but he didn't want to do that.
Right. Thank you. And then can the Jane Doe's report the mishandling and errors of the prosecution of the AG's office?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question because, I mean, who would they report it to, right? It's the AG and the top official of the state. So prosecution of the state. So, I mean, it maybe the feds, but I don't know that that's going to go anywhere. I don't think that's a viable option.
Okay, thank you.
And then just because this is being used as a defense for that the church is using, if you would just humor us and answer this question, can the court reporter distort the transcripts however they please?
No, absolutely not. The court reporter is, they take an oath to transcribe everything that is being said. in a proceeding. So no, the judge cannot distort a transcript. Nobody can. The court reporter will put down everything that is being said, and that's her duty, and she's taken an oath to do that, or he, whether it's a he or she.
Okay, and then I guess there's a few questions here. What happens to Nason's charges that and if you think you already answered that, then.
So yeah, they got dismissed. All of the other charges got dismissed except for the 3 that he pled guilty to.
Right.
But like I said, if the FBI was really interested, they could charge him for some of the other charges that can also be considered federal offenses, because child pornography is definitely a federal offense also. Human trafficking can be charged as a federal offense. So if they took an interest, they could do that.
Right.
Thank you. And then another question, why is it that the prosecution agreed to deal with Nason if the Jane Does were willing to testify in court and they also had a lot of evidence to provide?
So the people in charge of the case were the AG's office, not the Jane Does. And so if they decide that they want to settle the case, I mean, they let the Jane Does know, but that's as far as their obligation is concerned. There's nothing else. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay.
This is the next one.
And if the case had gone to trial and he had been found guilty, he would have probably appealed. Would that appeal have been approved, and then would a new trial have begun?
So that's a good question, but it's all relative because, so for instance, when you go to trial, there can be mistakes done during the trial. So for instance, a piece of evidence came in that shouldn't have come in, or a juror or a couple of jurors did something inappropriate and they should have been kicked out and they weren't. So there's a lot of things that can happen during a trial that could be appealable issues. So depending on what the appealable issue was, but regardless, I mean, if he went to trial, he was found guilty, he would have been convicted, right? And then his appeal is pending, he would still be in prison. And if the appellate court or the Supreme Court of California, or even if they took it up to the U.S. Supreme Court, whatever the issue is, right, he would have been doing his time in prison while waiting for that. And then if it gets overturned on appeal, then they do the trial again. So it's, you just do it again. That's all.
Okay.
Gotcha. This one's a good one. If Nason finishes his sentence and is out, what would be the restrictions he would face as a convicted sexual predator?
So under Megan's law, he won't be able to be around schools, live around schools, or parks. He would have to stay within a certain distance. I believe he'll be able to go to church. But, I don't know that he would stay in the US, right? Why would he?
So that's actually the part of the next question. Would he be able to go to church even with children present, by the way, at church?
Because of the First Amendment, right? Yes, I think he would be able to go. And I think that's an issue that's been brought up for a lot of the registered sex offenders, and they are able to go to church. Because I think what happens is when, people go to church, people usually have, their children, the parents have their children with them, there's some sense of protection there. But our church is different, right?
Yes.
So it's not like a typical church.
Right.
Right. would he be able to leave the country? And if he leaves the country, are there any restrictions for him in other countries?
So normally when you get you're done with your prison sentence, you're on parole, right? And you have to report to your parole officer, and you have to request permission to leave the country. So, but it probably would get permission to leave the country and come back. But even if he decides to leave the country in violation, if this parole officer says, no, I'm not going to give you permission to leave the country, if he does, I don't know that he would be a priority for them to extradite him back to the US. You see what I'm saying? So I just don't see him staying in the US. I think once he's released, he's gonna go to Mexico or a different country, because there's gonna be so many restrictions here for him.
Right.
Do you know if he'll be flagged in other countries as a criminal? I know that something happened in Mexico where they were trying to revoke his rights to be seen as a leader of the church.
Yeah, I don't know laws in other countries, so I don't know what they would do. Obviously Mexico and the US have reciprocal, laws, but I don't know that things would be that any of the restrictions in the US would be followed in Mexico. I mean, look at the governor of Jalisco, his comments about his friend, right? I don't know if you know about that, but so I even if they have reciprocal laws, the joining countries, I don't know that they would be followed in Mexico.
Right.
Gotcha. Do you want to say something?
No, I just wanted to ask this one real quick. Somebody asked about the social media and the internet. Apparently the church is asking its members to provide like all of their social media account informations. And they're just asking if that's legal, if the church can keep tabs on its members like that.
They can ask for it. You don't have to give it to them.
Okay.
Have to give. So I mean, if I don't know if they're asking for passwords. I mean, that's not right.
It's just a security violation, right? But it's not really something anyone can control.
Right.
Do you think there will be legal repercussions to the religious organization, LDM?
I don't believe so. I mean, look at the Catholic Church, right? They had so many, priests that, abuse so many children, yet they still have their church, right? So as a religious organization, I don't know that, there's going to be any consequences as far as that's concerned. There may be issues relating to tax evasion, So, I mean, there may be issues relating to that, but I don't know that they're going to shut it down. I don't know that they would shut the church down. One of the other things that I was always thinking about too is, because there's so many YouTubers that are just they're so violent and aggressive and just ugly and whatever. And a lot of people send threats, death threats, they could be flagged as a terrorist organization, within the FBI if that behavior continues. And so then they would be looked at fairly close. So, I mean, there's ramifications for people's behavior, and people need to be accountable for their behaviors.
And speaking of those YouTubers who tend to be very aggressive in their defense of the church, can they be sued by the Jane Does or anybody else who they're harassing?
They sure can. They sure can.
I know somebody asked about specifically Katsuki, if he could be sued because of the way he harasses people. But you're saying they can be.
Oh yeah, for defamation. But look at what's his name? I forget that guy that just had a trial. It was on Law and Crime, but he's the one that said that what was the mass shooting in that school, in the elementary school? Do you remember that mass shooting in the elementary school?
Which one?
Anyways, the first one, one of the very first ones.
No.
Is it Sandy
Sandy Hook.
So, Hook?
Yeah, I think he was saying, he had a YouTube channel, very popular, and he made statements that that was just a hoax, that was some kind of conspiracy, and the parents of the victims ended up suing him and for defamation, and they got a huge award by the jury. So yeah, the Jane Does could sue them, but he's in Mexico, and I don't know.
Right, Alex Jones, a few people. Alex Jones was sued. That's right. You're right.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good information. A couple of people asked about that. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I think that I wanted to touch on this too. I think it's so important to bring this up, that the Jane Does have been defamated and they have been harassed, and I would just advise everybody to remember that if you're doing this, you are doing this to victims, right? It's victims who have been through so much already, and I know that there has been so much said about them, and and just all of these lies spewed, and I think that a lot of us, now that we're out, we're actually grateful for the Jane Doe's bravery and for them speaking out, and that's why we're here now, and that's why we were able to open our eyes. So thank you so much for that information, and
I agree.
There's just so much to say about this.
The bravery of these Jane Does. I mean, these little girls, right? So they don't know how incredibly brave they were to face, this giant, basically. And it's been an incredible journey for them that they're still on, but they do need a lot of love and support, and I totally, my heart goes out to them, and they're just incredible little heroes.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely, they are heroes. And just to think about, they went through this trauma, and this trauma is just prolonged by all of these accusations, and not only the shunning from people that they knew their whole lives and they love, but also from just all of this retaliation against them. And I think it's a huge injustice, and I would just love to say that we do view them as heroes. We are grateful to them, and we hope good things for them. We hope good things for them healing, and they deserve that. And like you said, if now they're women, when this happened to them, they were in fact little girls. And I just think that's so important to remember.
Yes, absolutely. They've gone through enough.
Yes. What is the difference between the Jane Doe civil case and Sochi's civil case?
So Sochi's civil case is in federal court, and they're suing based on they're trying to make it a RICO case, which is taxation and just a bunch of more causes of action than the girls. I don't really practice federal law, so I can't really comment on what needs to be proven in a federal case, but it's similar. They're just more defendants. There's more causes of actions there, and they're trying to encompass more the organization, basically on a federal level rather than a state level.
I think that's it for these questions.
Well, thank you. And I think that we've pretty much answered all the ones in the chat, or at least gone over the answer to those questions. There was only one that stood out to me, one more that stood out to me. Can regular members join any lawsuit for exploitation for all the work we've done for this organization?
So they can contact an attorney similar to those or Sochi's attorneys for for those types of that type of use. Yes.
Okay, so reach out to them, essentially, those attorneys?
Yes. I mean, I would start there, and then if they're not taking any cases, maybe they can refer them to somebody else. But yes, that I would start there.
Okay, thank you.
I know I also saw another question. Is it true that a wife can't um, go against her spouse or can't testify against her spouse?
Yeah, there is spousal privilege, so they can't be compelled to testify against their spouse. I mean, they can if they want to, but if they don't want to, they can be compelled.
Okay, gotcha.
And well, we're almost at the two-hour mark. Is there anything else that you would like to share with anybody who comes across this video?
No, I just think, like I said before, I think everybody has their own personal journey and their own timing. I think, I think if we can just provide information to people and then let them make their own decisions, at least, with the correct information, let them decide what they want to do. Obviously, we all have different experiences in life, and we've gone through different ups and downs and different difficulties. But I think, God gave us he gave us intelligence to use it and not just to follow every single thing that we are being told. I think, and I don't read the Bible too much, but when Paul came to Berea, right? When he told them, he goes, you guys are the most noble ones because you have basically verified what I'm telling you with it's in scriptures. And
Right.
I think that is a testimony that we can take to ourselves and say, hey, look, yeah, it's okay for us to ask questions. It's okay for us to want the truth. If you had your parents, your dad or your mom going through a criminal case, being charged for something, wouldn't you want to go to the court hearings? Wouldn't you want to know what's going on? Wouldn't you, want to know, what is, I mean, Nathan was, like a father figure for the church, right? I mean, I think that would be normal for us to want to know what's happening, for us to want to know the truth, and I think I don't think God punishes you for wanting to know the truth, and I don't Jesus condones for us to lie on his behalf, or for lie to cover to whatever. That's not what he came to teach us. I mean, in so if we stick to those principles, then you'll make the right decision on your own, but you gotta ration it. You gotta think about what is important to you. And maybe for a lot of people, their community and their way of life, that's what's important to them. But maybe with all of this information and everybody talking about this, maybe they'll make changes in the church. Maybe they'll they'll take mandatory reporting more serious, so that crimes do not get, just slipped under the rug and not reported, right? Maybe one person's not going to have all the power to do whatever they want, so
Right.
hopefully maybe this is shaking things up to where things are going to change. And for those family members of ours that are still there, maybe, it'll be good for them that all of these changes may be coming. I don't know. So, but for whatever it's worth, here we are. And thank you guys for inviting me.
Thank you so much for being here with us. And I know that as this kind of, usually what happens is that after the video gets published, more people find it and will comment things. So if you're okay with coming back in the future, we would love to have you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do it.
Great.
Thank you so
All right,
much.
have a good night.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
It was nice having you. God bless you.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Let me see.
Well, I think que también nosotros ya nos vamos.
Sí, ya es tarde. A todos los que nos acompañaron, muchísimas gracias. Disculpen si no contestamos su pregunta exactamente como la habían puesto, pero tratamos de cubrir la más información posible. Y Nelly tenía muchísima, muy buena información para todos los que, pues teníamos dudas. Yo pienso que todos teníamos dudas de cómo exactamente habían pasado las cosas y agradecemos mucho a Nelly que nos acompañó. Y también este video fue en inglés, pero vamos a hacer videos en español, ya sean traducciones o sea otro video, otra entrevista para volver a repasar algunas de estas preguntas, pero agradecemos mucho los que no hablan inglés muy bien, pero de todos modos nos acompañaron y no nos vamos a olvidar del español.
No nos vamos a olvidar de ustedes. Definitivamente solamente estamos tratando de ayudar a las personas que podamos ayudar y como dijo Misael, hay muchas personas que hablan inglés y también les queríamos hacer este servicio, poderles ayudar. Y también Nelly se sentía más cómoda hablando en inglés, así que queríamos también como nuestra guest,
Invitada.
como nuestra invitada también, que ella se sintiera lo más cómoda posible. Pero como dice Misael, no sabía, también porque hay tanta información, ¿verdad? Como hay tanta información en español, no sabíamos si fuera necesario hacer esto en español también, esta entrevista, pero como ya vimos que sí, nos vamos a asegurar de que también en español
publiquemos
podamos,
esta información.
Podamos también suplir esta información con mucho gusto.
Claro que sí. Y también guardamos las preguntas que encontramos y vamos a buscar la forma de incorporarlas en nuestro próximo video. Y también tenemos comunicación con Nelly. Entonces, si hay algo que nosotros no sabemos, se lo vamos a preguntar a ella y vamos a traer más información también directamente de Nelly. Entonces, por favor, estén al tanto.
Sí.
Bueno.
And to everybody, anybody who only speaks English, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that this was helpful and useful. Yeah. I know I learned a lot, so that's just a blessing to be able to kind of finally put answers to questions that we might have had for a long time, or things that we have heard in church, or things that our family members have heard in church, and maybe we don't know how to answer because we're not legal professionals.
Right. So
again, we hope that this was helpful, and we're so happy to have the opportunity to be here with you, and we hope God bless you. I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, that's it. Have a great night.